Hello there. You found it. The most boring video to put you to sleep. Seriously, try it. This isn't a trick. There's no surprise ending. No dramatic twist. Just you, me, and a gentle descent into absolute unapologetic monotony. Because tonight, you don't need stimulation. You don't need flashing lights, shocking thumbnails, or motivational speeches. You need something dull, something slow, something forgettable. And I'd like to introduce you to someone. His name is Ernest. Now, Ernest was not remarkable in any way. He didn't climb mountains. He didn't win awards. He didn't even jaywalk. Ernest lived in a small town called Linwood. Population, 1,045. Elevation, 304 feet above sea level. Not that it mattered, there were no hills. Linwood was the kind of place where the grocery store closed at 6 p.m. And breaking news meant the library got a new fax machine. That's where Ernest thrived. He lived in a modest, beige-colored house. The kind of beige that made other beiges look adventurous. With one tree in the front yard that leaned slightly left, but never fell. Every morning, Ernest woke up at 6:48 a.m. Not 6:45, not 7, 6:48. It was the perfect time, not too early, not too late, just slightly uneventful. He would slide his feet into brown corduroy slippers, same ones since 2012. Then walk to the kitchen and prepare his breakfast. A single slice of dry toast, one soft-boiled egg, and exactly 4 sips of lukewarm water. He never drank a 5th sip. That would be excessive. After breakfast, Ernest would sit on the porch, not to watch the sunrise, but to observe his neighbor's mailbox. Sometimes it opened, sometimes it didn't. He liked the unpredictability of it. By 8:03 a.m., Ernest would begin his walk. Not a power walk, not a jog, just a casual, slow-paced shuffle around the block. One loop. No shortcuts. He always carried a small notepad, not to write in, just to hold. It gave his hands something to do. The pages were blank. They stayed blank. Now you might wonder, what did Ernest do for a living? Well, Ernest was a drawer labeler. He labeled drawers. In the back of the Linwood Municipal Building, in a softly humming room filled with beige filing cabinets, Ernest had a desk. And in that desk were drawers. And in those drawers were more labels. He'd sit there, in his chair that creaked every third swivel, and carefully print out labels like paper, miscellaneous, pens, blue only, binder clips, discarded. Sometimes he'd pause to sharpen a pencil, even if it didn't need sharpening. The sound was comforting. At precisely 10:47 a.m., he'd open his lunchbox. Inside, a small apple, never large, 1 slice of cheddar, and 6 unsalted crackers. The apple always had a tiny bruise, not because he liked bruised apples. It just always happened that way. If you're still with me, still awake, good. But if you're already drifting, even better, because that's what Ernest would want. He wasn't a man of action. He was a man of stillness, a man of mild temperatures, neutral colors, and silent afternoons. After lunch, Ernest would take a break, but not like most people. No scrolling. No phone calls, just staring at what you ask. The office fern. It wasn't his fern, but it sat near the copier. And every day at 11:12 a.m., Ernest would stand exactly 4 feet away from it and observe its posture. It didn't do much. Occasionally a leaf would droop. Sometimes not. That was enough. Once a coworker asked, "Ernest, are you okay?" He nodded. "Just giving the ferns some company," he replied. And that was that. At noon, the janitor's radio would play the same soft jazz song. No lyrics. Just saxophone. Ernest never asked what the song was called. He just referred to it as Track 3. By 1:06 p.m., he'd return to his drawer labeling. Careful, steady, with zero urgency. He once told a new hire, "A rushed label is a crooked label." The new hire laughed. Ernest didn't. He meant it. The highlight of Ernest's day came at 3:33 p.m. That's when the office clock chimed once. Just one soft note, dull and mechanical. Ernest would pause, blink slowly, and whisper to himself, "There it is," then resume working. When the workday ended at 4:45 p.m., Ernest would pack up in complete silence. No rushing to the door. No chatting at the elevator. He liked to be the last one out. Felt balanced. Back at home, Ernest had routines. He would feed his goldfish, whom he never named. He believed names were unnecessary unless absolutely required. He simply called it fish. Fish didn't seem to mind. Dinner was always at 6 p.m. sharp. One bowl of beige lentils. No spices. No garnished. Just lentils. Then he'd turn on the TV not to watch, just to listen to the soft static between channels. He once found a station that showed nothing but blank weather maps. That became his favorite. At 7:42 p.m., Ernest would read. His favorite book? The History of Sandpaper. A thrilling deep dive into grit levels and manufacturing processes. Chapter 4 was about coarseness ratings. He read it 6 times. By 8:30 p.m., he'd wind his analog wall clock. Just 3 gentle turns. No more, no less. He liked the sound it made. Tick, tick, tick. He'd then brush his teeth for exactly 2 minutes, using a toothbrush that came free with a magazine subscription. It was labeled soft. At 9 p.m. sharp, Ernest would lie in bed, arms by his side, head perfectly centered on the pillow, sheets tucked just right, corners folded like envelopes. He never set an alarm. He always woke up naturally, at 6:48 a.m., without fail. And that was Ernest, a man of gentle repetition, of uneventful calm, of routines so predictable they made the passing of time feel soft. If your eyelids are starting to feel heavy, let them. That's the gift Ernest offers, a slow drift into stillness. Ernest didn't have many decorations in his home, just a framed picture of a blank wall. He said it reminded him of possibility. Or was it neutrality? Either way, it made him smile. Inwardly, his calendar had no appointments, only notes like, refold towels, 2nd Tuesday, rotate socks, dust behind books, gently. He didn't use digital reminders. He trusted his body clock, and his body clock trusted him back. On weekends, Ernest visited the library, but not to borrow books. He liked the sound of pages being turned, the gentle shuffling, the soft echo of distant footsteps, the occasional cough, comforting, like auditory wallpaper. He once checked out a book on moss, not because he was interested in moss, but because he liked the typography on the cover. It was a serif font, very balanced. Sundays were for tea. Always the same blend, barley tea.
No sugar, no milk.
He steeped it exactly 6 minutes, then poured it into the same mug he'd used since 2003. It said, "World's most medium man." He never questioned where it came from. It just existed. Ernest's neighbors appreciated his quiet. He never played loud music, never threw parties. Once, someone invited him to a neighborhood cookout. He brought boiled potatoes.
No seasoning, no butter.
Just potatoes. No one touched them, except Ernest. He had 3. At the local store, the cashier knew his order by heart. Oatmeal, 2 bananas, and beige socks. He always paid with exact change. Never a cent over. Never a moment wasted fishing for coins. Sometimes the cashier would say, "You're consistent, Ernest," and he'd nod slowly. "As the sunrise," he'd reply, even though he rarely watched the sunrise. He preferred overcast mornings. His hobbies were minimal. He once collected paper clips, not for fun, just to see how many sizes existed. He found 7. He arranged them by length, then by shade of metallic finish. He never told anyone, but it brought him great satisfaction. And so the rhythm of Ernest's days continued, like a soft metronome set to a peaceful tempo.
No chaos, no surprises.
Just quiet. If your body's getting heavier, if your mind is beginning to float gently like a feather in a still room, that's good. That's Ernest working his magic. Ernest had a fish tank, but no fish, just one smooth stone, a plastic plant, and a small ceramic bridge. He liked the idea of water existing with no obligations. Nothing swimming, nothing hunting, just stillness. Every Thursday he dusted the bridge, using a tiny brush he bought from an art supply store in 1997. It had 1 bristle left. He liked that bristle. It knew its job. Ernest's hallway light took a full 3 seconds to turn on. He never replaced it. He liked the delay. It made the light feel earned. He wore corduroy slippers, not because they were comfortable. They weren't, but because they made a sound. Swish, 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 like a soft broom sweeping across time. Every morning he read the weather report, then stayed inside, unless it was exactly 17 degrees Celsius. Then he might take a walk, not far, just around the block, where he would nod politely at a tree he named Simon. Simon was average in every way. Medium height, medium leaves, medium bark. But Simon had never disappointed him, and Ernest appreciated that. On his shelves, books sat untouched. Titles like The History of Envelopes, Dust, A Journey, and Volume 2, Beige Architecture. He never read them. He just liked knowing they were there, quietly existing, just like him. When the postman came, Ernest always said the same thing. "Nothing urgent today, I hope." And the postman would reply, "Not a single thing, Ernest." And both men would smile. Quiet, inward smile. The kind you don't share. You just hold gently in your chest. His favorite sound? The hum of his refrigerator. Low, even, endless. Like a monotone lullaby sung by a very shy machine. He had a kitchen drawer labeled strings. Not string, strings, plural. Each one curled in its own zip bag. No reason, just because. And so, as the hours folded into each other, soft and indistinct like layers of a well-worn blanket, Ernest remained unchanged. Not heroic, not bold, not ambitious, just earnest, still, silent, steady. And maybe now, as your thoughts drift like dust in a sunbeam, you realize the beauty in boredom, the comfort in repetition, the peace in absolutely nothing happening. Ernest never used an alarm clock. He trusted his body to wake him at 6:43 a.m. And it did, every day, even on weekends, even on holidays, because his body, like everything else in his life, respected routine. He had a bath mat shaped like a rectangle, beige, with slightly darker beige stripes. It wasn't soft, but it didn't slip, and that, to Ernest, was enough. Breakfast, 2 slices of toast, plain, no butter, no jam, just toasted bread. Sometimes, when he felt adventurous, he toasted them at level 4 instead of 3, but only once a month, usually on the 18th. No idea why. He had a calendar on the fridge, each square filled with exactly 1 small black dot. Not for appointments. He had none, just to mark the passing of days. A soft acknowledgement that time was doing its thing. His neighbor, Mr. Pelham, once asked, "Why do you put a dot on each day?" Ernest replied, "So they don't feel left out." Mr. Pelham nodded. He never asked again. On Tuesdays, Ernest watered his plants, not because they needed it, they were plastic, but because he liked the ritual. He poured just enough water to wet the top layer of soil, then waited precisely 11 minutes and wiped it dry with a paper towel. Some people might call that strange. Ernest called it respectful. He had a drawer labeled mildly important. Inside were things like 1 rubber band, 2 coupons for canned peas, expired, and a hand-drawn map of his living room. He never used the map. He knew the layout, but he liked knowing it existed. At 3:30 p.m., he'd sit in his brown chair. Not beige, brown. It was the most rebellious thing he owned. He'd stare out the window, not at anything in particular, just the air, the way it moved, almost imperceptibly, like the world exhaling. And maybe now, as you sit or lie still, you feel a little of that same exhale, a softness behind your eyes, a heaviness in your limbs, like a warm blanket of nothingness wrapping around your thoughts. Ernest never chased excitement. He didn't need it, because in stillness, he had everything. Every Wednesday evening, Ernest opened his window exactly halfway. Not a crack, not all the way, just halfway, to let in the middle amount of air. Then he'd sit on his brown chair, hold a pencil, not to write with, just to hold. It was yellow, number 2, unsharpened. He liked how it felt in his hand. The quiet promise of potential that would never be used. On his shelf were 31 books. He had read all of them, the introductions, just the introductions. He believed the first few pages told you everything you needed to know. Why clutter the mind with endings? There was one book titled A History of Gravel. He liked that one especially. Chapter 1 was called Pebbles with Purpose. He read that chapter 14 times. Once every leap year, twice during cloudy Junes, and whenever the supermarket rearranged its aisles. He found it grounding. In his kitchen drawer were 5 teaspoons, all identical, lined up handle to tip.
No forks.
He didn't like forks. They're too aggressive, he once said. Like a spoon with opinions. Ernest's radio was always tuned to static. Not music, not talk, Just the soft, snowy whisper of nothing calmed him. It reminded him that silence, too, had a sound, a sort of invisible lullaby. And perhaps now, as you listen, your thoughts are slowing, one by one, like clouds drifting behind your eyes, effortless, unbothered, just passing through. Ernest didn't fight the day. He didn't resist the night. He simply moved within them, like a pebble in a quiet stream. Let's move gently now into part 7. Or, if your eyes are already drifting closed, that's perfectly okay too. At precisely 8:04 p.m., Ernest would water his plant. Just one pot hose, named Mildred. He'd pour exactly half a cup of room-temperature water, tilt the watering can to a 45-degree angle, and whisper, "There you go, Mildred." He believed plants grew better when spoken to gently, but only in lowercase tones, never uppercase. On his wall hung a calendar. Every box was blank, except for the third Thursday of March, which read, "By beige socks." He hadn't missed that appointment in 17 years. The shopkeeper no longer asked questions, just handed him a fresh pack, folded precisely. His phone never rang, not because it was off, but because no one had his number, not even him. He once tried to memorize it, got as far as the first 5 digits, then thought, what for? At 9:12 p.m., he'd brush his teeth with a soft bristle brush and non-minty paste labeled mild flavor. He disliked extremes. Too hot, too cold, too spicy, too anything. Life, Ernest believed, was best lived in the lukewarm middle, like soup after 10 minutes on the counter. He had one towel, beige, folded 3 times, always facing left. If it was ever turned the wrong way, he would notice. He always noticed. And then, by 9:43 p.m., he'd sit on the edge of his bed, not lie down, just sit, back straight, hands on knees, looking out the window at the lamppost across the street. It flickered every 16 seconds. He once timed it, then wrote it down, then timed it again. Still 16. And maybe you're starting to notice your own flickers now. That gentle drowsiness behind the eyes, the way your breath settles in like soft linen.
No urgency.
No pressure, just being. Because like Ernest, you don't need much, just a place to be still, a rhythm to follow, and permission to fade. At 9:56 p.m., Ernest would finally lie down, flat on his back. No pillow under his head, just one tucked gently beneath his knees, for lumbar support. He didn't read before bed, not because he disliked books, but because he had once read a study that said screens and pages stimulate the mind. And stimulation was not welcome here. His blanket was a neutral gray, weighted but not heavy, folded down exactly to his collarbone. Not over, never over. That would be chaos. The window was always cracked open 1 inch. No more, no less. Just enough for a whisper of air. Ernest liked to hear the sound of nothing. Not silence. Nothing. The difference to him was important. Silence felt like absence. Nothingness felt full. Like the space between thoughts, between seconds, between the tick and the talk. At 10:04 p.m., he would blink once, then twice, then close his eyes. And as his mind floated gently toward slumber, he'd mentally recite the name of every kitchen item he owned, in alphabetical order: apron, bowl, colander, dish rack, egg timer. He never made it past ladle. That was always the end. Every night. Not because he fell asleep immediately, but because something about the word ladle felt so final. And now, as Ernest begins to drift off, maybe you feel it too. The comfort of repetition, the weight of quiet rituals, the way each word is like a soft thread, weaving you into a warm, invisible blanket. So stay here. No need to reach for anything. Let the world shrink down to a spoon, a lamp, a flicker, a breath. Let's continue slowly. By morning, Ernest always woke up 1 minute before his alarm.
6:59 Uhr morgens.
Never 7 o'clock, never 6:58. He called it a gentle prelude. He would stretch very gently only the right leg, then the left. Then he would sit at the edge of his bed, both feet planted exactly 14 inches apart. He'd stare at the floor for 45 seconds, not in thought, just in stillness. Then, like every morning before, he'd put on his slippers, left foot first, and walk slowly to the kitchen. Breakfast was always the same. Oatmeal with a single pinch of cinnamon.
No sugar. No milk.
Just the oats, and the heat, and the pinch. He used a wooden spoon, not because it tasted better, but because metal made a tiny clinking sound in the bowl, and that felt distracting. After breakfast, Ernest would rinse the bowl, dry it with a beige cotton towel, and place it on the third shelf from the top, right side, second stack. Then came the part of the day he called the opening ceremony. It involved pulling the curtains back by 30 degrees, straightening the small rug by the front door, and checking the barometer he mounted to the hallway wall in 1993. Not because he needed the weather, but because he liked to see the little needle move. "Ah," he would say, still holding steady, and he'd smile. Not a big smile, just enough. Ernest's life wasn't marked by adventure, nor achievement, nor acclaim, but it had a rhythm, a texture, comfort, and in that texture, there was meaning. Now, as you breathe gently, feeling the rhythm of your own pulse, your eyelids may be heavier than before, and that's good. That's natural, because the mind, like Ernest's spoon, wants to settle quietly. Every Tuesday at 9:45 a.m., Ernest would dust the bookshelf. He owned exactly 27 books, no more, no less, all hardcovers, all aligned perfectly at the edge. He didn't read them often, but he liked knowing they were there, especially the one titled The History of Envelopes. He never finished it, not because it was boring, but because it was too interesting, and that felt disruptive. After dusting, he would sit in his reading chair, upholstered in soft gray tweed, and stare out the window. Nothing usually happened out there, which was perfect. Sometimes a squirrel, sometimes a cloud. Once, a neighbor walked by wearing mismatched socks. Ernest made a note of that in his mental journal, but never mentioned it. He wasn't one to stir things up. At exactly 11:02 a.m., he would get up, boil water in a quiet kettle, the kind without a whistle, and make his second cup of tea for the day. Chamomile. Always chamomile. He used the same mug each time. It had a tiny chip near the handle. He liked that chip. It made the mug uniquely his. He would sip slowly. 3 small sips, then 1 long pause. Repeat. until the cup was empty, which always happened at exactly 11:17 a.m. Then he'd rinse it, without soap, and set it on the drying rack, handle facing east, because, well, that's how it balanced with the light. You see, Ernest wasn't trying to impress anyone. He didn't chase trends, didn't scroll endlessly, didn't crave the next big thing. He found his comfort in quiet routines, and the quiet loved him back. And as you listen to his day, something inside you, maybe the part that's tired of loudness, begins to soften, to slow, to rest. And that's the whole point, isn't it? After his walk, Ernest would return home at precisely 3:12 p.m., never 3:10. That would seem rushed, and 3:14 felt a vaguely unsettling. He'd step inside, remove his shoes, brown loafers with worn soles, and place them on a square mat by the door. He rotated them 90 degrees each day, so they wore evenly. Even shoes he believed deserved balance. Then he'd check on his plant. It was a pothose, named Gregory, not because he looked like a Gregory, but because one day Ernest woke up and decided that's what his name should be. Gregory sat on the windowsill. Not too much sun, not too little. Ernest watered him every third day. Exactly 100 milliliters, measured with a small plastic cup that once held applesauce. He kept a small notebook titled, Gregory's Growth. Each entry was a sentence. New leaf visible on left vine. Seems to enjoy morning light more than afternoon. Dropped one leaf, possibly unrelated to my humming. Yes, Ernest hummed. Every Wednesday afternoon at 3:30 p.m., a low, barely there tune. Something between a lullaby and a memory. Gregory seemed to like it, or at least never protested. At 4 p.m., Ernest would sit at his table and organize his receipts. Not for taxes, not for budgeting, just because he had envelopes marked groceries, miscellaneous, paper clips and related, and a fourth one simply labeled things I can't remember buying. That one was thicker than the others. He never threw receipts away. He believed every purchase told a story. Even if the story was, bought oatmeal again, still prefer the plain one. And now, as we sit in this moment with Ernest, maybe your breath is softer. Maybe your thoughts are quieter. Maybe that part of you that always needs to do has decided for just now to simply be. And in the world of Ernest, that's more than enough. Because in the stillness, in the slow turn of the day, there's something deeply reassuring. Part 13 is coming, and you don't need to do a thing but res. At 4:48 p.m., Ernest would make a single cup of tea, Earl Grey, 2 teaspoons of leaves, steeped for exactly 4 minutes. No more, no less, milk first, then tea. He believed the order mattered. Even if it didn't, he would sit on his couch, an olive green fabric couch with one slightly sunken cushion, and place the cup on a cork coaster. The coaster had a small chip on the edge. Ernest had considered replacing it, but decided the imperfection gave it character. He sipped slowly, 3 sips every 5 minutes, the same pacing he used when Edna, his former neighbor, brought him chamomile. The television sat across from him, but it was never turned on. Instead, he liked the idea of the television, that something could be there, but didn't have to be. Next to the couch sat a bookshelf. It held books with titles like A brief history of cement, the evolution of drawers, and the life cycle of parking meters. He didn't read them quickly, just a few pages a day, sometimes rereading the same line, not because he forgot it, but because it was pleasant. Once, on page 74 of Drawers, he came across the sentence, "Most drawers use a simple sliding mechanism." He paused, underlined it with a pencil, then whispered, "Of course they do." He stared out the window for a while, just enough time to watch the shadows shift on the pavement, just enough time to feel the warmth of a day beginning to close. And maybe you, like Ernest, feel your own thoughts sliding into place, like drawers, quiet, functional, satisfyingly simple. Sleep doesn't always arrive with a crash. Sometimes it tiptoes in, soft and slow, like a man sipping tea, reading about furniture. Part 14 will follow, but for now, let yourself drift. At 5:37 p.m., Ernest would water his plants. Not all of them, just the odd-numbered ones. The evens were for Sundays. This was Tuesday. Routine mattered. Plant number 1 was a pothose, named Leafy. Plant number 3, a jade succulent, unnamed, but appreciated. Plant number 5 was barely alive. Ernest admired its effort. He used a small tin watering can, olive green like his couch. It made a soft glug sound with every pour. He liked that sound, gentle, predictable, like rain that knows when to stop. Each pot had a little tag, moisture levels recorded in pencil. Tuesday, slightly dry. Tuesday, nearly moist. He never overwatered. He never guessed. After watering, he'd sit on his stool, a three-legged one from his grandfather's shed. He didn't need a stool, but it felt nostalgic. The seat creaked quietly when he sat. That was part of the appeal. He would sit, fold his hands, and look at his plants. He once read that plants respond to words, so he whispered to them. Not affirmations, just observations. "You're still growing. Good work, Leafy. You survived Monday. That's something." The plants didn't talk back, which was ideal. Maybe now, your own breathing has become like Ernest's watering. Rhythmic, gentle, spaced. Maybe you can feel your limbs soften, your thoughts slow down like a whisper to a houseplant.
No rush. No urgency.
Just a man, a watering can, and a jade succulent doing its best. Part 15 coming next. But for now, let the quiet grow. By 6:04 p.m., Ernest prepared dinner. Nothing exotic. A bowl of steamed carrots, and 5 plain crackers unsalted. Sometimes he added a 6th, but only on Fridays. Today was Tuesday. He placed the carrots neatly on a beige ceramic plate. No garnish, no seasoning, just orange. He lined the crackers side by side like fence posts, each one facing the same direction. He once accidentally rotated one. Didn't sit right with him. He adjusted it before eating. He chewed slowly, exactly 20 chews per bite. That number felt right. Dinner was always quiet. No music, no phone, just the faint hum of the refrigerator in the background. Sometimes he'd open the window and listen to the neighbor's sprinkler system. CHCH. Pause. CHCH. Pause. Soothing, like mechanical rain. He sipped lukewarm water from a cup with a tiny chip in the rim. He knew where the chip was. He always sipped from the opposite side. When dinner was done, he rinsed the plate and the cup, dried them with a towel labeled Tuesday, and returned them to their designated spots. There was no need for variety, no craving for spice, just nourishment, simple, orderly, unrushed. And maybe, like Ernest's dinner, your thoughts are becoming simple now, less colorful, more calm, like 5 plain crackers in a straight line, like carrots that don't ask for attention. There's beauty in simplicity. There's rest in repetition. Let's stay here for a while. After dinner, Ernest sat in his reading chair. It was corduroy, beige, a little lumpy, but in the way that felt familiar. He didn't read novels, too many plot twists. Instead, he read the appliance manuals he had collected over the years. Tonight's choice? The instruction booklet for his electric kettle.
Model WK200.
12 pages, black and white, stapled in the center. He started on page 1. Thank you for purchasing the WK200. This appliance is designed to boil water quickly and efficiently. Promising beginning. He read slowly, even the bullet points, even the legal disclaimers. Page 3 detailed the water level window. It had 3 markings: MIN, MID, and max. Ernest had tested all 3 on 3 separate occasions. He confirmed they were accurate. By 7:15 p.m., he paused to reflect. He underlined the sentence, "Do not immerse the kettle in water. Important advice." He nodded approvingly. Safety first. He flipped to page 6. Troubleshooting. If the kettle doesn't turn on, ensure it is plugged in. Check the power switch. Wait 5 minutes and try again. He whispered the steps to himself, just in case. By page 9, he began to feel satisfied. He would sleep well tonight. He returned the manual to its plastic sleeve, labeled kitchen, kettle, filed in a drawer next to toaster, Model T1000, and blender, Revision B. You see, the world is full of excitement, but Ernest found peace in the mundane, in kettles and manuals and quiet evenings. And maybe you're feeling that too. That gentle weight in your body, the warmth behind your eyelids, the comfort of knowing nothing surprising is about to happen. Because in this story, we slow down, we soften, we sleep. At exactly 8 p.m., Ernest opened the bottom drawer of his dresser. Creaked. The same creak it had made every evening for 14 years. He rather liked that sound. Inside the drawer was a single stack of identical pajamas. Cotton, striped, blue and gray. He selected the top pair, because that was the rule. Top first always. Rotation mattered. He folded the clothes he wore during the day, placed them on the second shelf from the top, left-hand side. That was the worn but not dirty section. He had 3 categories for clothes: clean, worn but not dirty, laundry bound. Only Tuesdays were for laundry, and today was Monday, so the shelf it was. He brushed his teeth next. 2 full minutes. Not 1:58, not 2:01. Exactly 2. He timed it using the egg timer on the bathroom sink. It was shaped like a tiny tomato. His toothbrush had soft bristles. The packaging once claimed it was gentle on enamel. That sounded important. Ernest valued enamel. When he rinsed his mouth, he did so with 6 sips of water. No more, no less. He dried his hands on the beige towel, the one labeled MON, in faded embroidery. There were 7 towels, color-coded, each with its own day. Order mattered to Ernest. It made the world quieter. And now, as he turned off the bathroom light, there was a stillness in the air, a soft kind of quiet that settled gently around his shoulders. He felt the weight of predictability, like a familiar blanket. You might be feeling that too. Your breath slowing, your limbs heavy, your thoughts fading like the last page of a manual, carefully placed back where it belongs. Let the quiet in. At precisely 8:17 p.m., Ernest turned down his bedsheets, one corner at a time, first the left, then the right, then a small, barely noticeable fluff of the pillow. He didn't need to do that part, but it felt polite. He then sat on the edge of his bed, feet flat on the floor, hands resting lightly on his knees, and he stared at the wall for exactly 3 minutes. Not to think, not to daydream, just to pause. You see, that pause was important. It marked the end of the day, a gentle closing bracket on the long paragraph of quiet tasks. Then came the light switch, the small one on the bedside table. Clicked when you pressed it, a soft click, a dignified click. He liked that. Ernest slid under the sheets the way one might slip into a perfectly drawn bath. Slow, careful, no ripples, no sudden movements. He adjusted his pillow, then readjusted it, because the first time was never quite right. Not because of the pillow, but because of the ritual. Everything had to feel correct, balanced, centered. As you listen now, maybe your eyes are getting heavier, or maybe they're already closed. And that's okay, because not much more happens tonight. And that's the point. Ernest lay there, listening to the quiet hum of nothing in particular. A distant clock, the faint groan of a pipe, the whisper of the night as it folded in on itself. No chaos, no noise, no surprises, just Ernest, just this moment, just stillness. By 8:23 p.m., Ernest's thoughts had already begun to slow, not disappear entirely, just stretch out, like long shadows on a quiet winter street. He thought briefly about socks, not a particular pair, just the general concept, how some socks are too tight around the ankle, and how others slide down unexpectedly. But his current ones, perfectly snug. He smiled at that, softly, the kind of smile that never quite reaches the surface. It just hums inside. His room smelled faintly of lavender, not because he sprayed anything, but because years ago someone gave him a drawer sachet, and he never removed it. Now it had settled into the fabric of his life, like most things Ernest kept, unnoticed but deeply familiar. The moonlight pressed gently through the blinds, not bright, not dramatic, just there, spilling soft lines across his beige carpet. One line intersected with his slipper. He thought about moving it, but then didn't, because even the misplaced slipper belonged to the rhythm of tonight. Outside, a leaf scraped the sidewalk, just once, just enough to remind Ernest that the world was still turning, but slowly, quietly, like a lullaby with no chorus. And now, even his breath had fallen into that rhythm. Inhale, exhale. Time became water, and Ernest, still as stone at the bottom of it. By 9 p.m., Ernest turned off exactly one lamp, the one beside the armchair. The other lamps were already off. They had no reason to be on. He folded the blanket over the backrest, placing the corners just so, aligned, not overlapping. He checked the window latch, still secure. He didn't expect wind, but he liked knowing it was ready. His bedtime routine was not sacred, but it was consistent.